What's up, JEFusion fans? This is Philip, and welcome back to another video. So, it's been a while since I talked about Kamen Rider Zits and, what's been happening within the show. But I think I'd like to talk about, one important plot, especially regarding, like the past few episodes. And this is the rather tragic relationship between Nem and Sayuri, aka the lady. So, with that said, all the things that I am going to talk about in this video might contain some spoilers from, I don't know, like episodes 45 maybe until 49, which is at least um, as far as this video is concerned. So, episode 49 is the most recent episode. So, yes, we are one episode away from the end of the show. So, anyways, let's talk about like why this relationship between the two of them is so tragic. So, if you guys can remember, so basically near the halfway point of the show, so it was revealed that Nem is Sayuri's daughter, quote unquote. So this came about. So when Sayuri, aka the lady. So we're gonna call her the lady for the rest of this video just to keep it uniform. So the lady had a vision. She had a dream where, she was walking with a man who was supposed to be, her quote unquote husband, and she was pregnant. So she had, uh, so she basically, despite being a code agent, so the lady still wanted to have like a normal life deep inside. If we probe into what would be her, subconscious, that's what she desired the most. But she had to let go of it. Basically, she doesn't really say anything, but having working for an organization that basically is in charge of like saving the world from actual nightmare threats. Well, she probably had to let go of her dreams at some point. However, uh, the nightmare actually took advantage of this situation, and lo and behold, she wakes up with a baby girl in her hands. And this girl would be revealed to be Nemu. So, again, we already kind of know about Nemu's backstory when, if we go back to like episode 6 and 7, because that's where Nemu's backstory starts to be revealed. But again, we learn, especially within episodes 24, 25, that she is actually, uh, you know, well, in a way, we can say that she is the lady's daughter, but how her existence came to be was the bigger plot twist. As it turns out, she is basically a nightmare herself. So, again, like when Lady woke up from her dream, so she, again, this is also the dream where she got the scar on her right hand. And again, because of it, she woke up, boom, baby. Nemu's born. Quite, to put it very simply. So, Nem's existence is unique because, again, she looks like a human, but she also has, kind of nightmare abilities, being in everyone's dreams. Like, uh, many people can dream about her at the same time. Like they can have the same dream about her and whatnot. But again, as the series progresses, so the lady has this obsession where she's trying to protect her uh, daughter for all intents and purposes, and this becomes like quite peak around like episode 42, 43, if I remember correctly. You can correct me down in the comments, but this is as far as I can remember. So, like Nim, or I don't know if it's the lady's uh, machinations or Nim herself, but we also know at some point that the lady eventually, fused with her personal nightmare, the Phantom Gore nightmare, and she wanted to create an illusion for Nim, and basically create an ideal world for her. However, what happens is, we see Nem and the lady live life together as quote unquote a normal family, because, again, I'm using the air quotes because we know that this is just an illusion. This is not real. So, Nemu's still like a popular celebrity, and her mom is uh, definitely supporting her. And it kind of looks like a deja vu in some situations. Like that episode kind of shows like deja vu stuff, uh, and of course we see like how everyone's memories have been altered. You know, like for example, Minami is Nemu's manager, so Kensei never left the police force and was actually assigned as her personal bodyguard, and you know Inspector Fujimi and Nazca had their roles reversed, which is really really funny. But yeah, again, this is because everything was an illusion, and so everybody's characters were distorted, and like even Baku actually like didn't exist. But here's the kicker. So, at some point we are introduced to the Oblivion Gore nightmare, which turns out to be Nemu's own personal nightmare. And as we've seen up until this point, like why the Phantom Gore nightmare, or rather the Oblivion, sorry. So, like, the Oblivion nightmare is by far like the biggest threat in all of the Kamen Rider Z's, by far, at least if we're looking at the TV series. So, it's actually quite interesting to think about, but let me explain. So, of course, like the Gore nightmares are, quite powerful beings. We see how the Catastrophe Nightmare, aka Baku's personal nightmare, was able to destroy code from within the dream world, you know, and spoilers, so it also eliminated Zero. So, of course, we see how destructive the Catastrophe Phantom, or rather the Catastrophe Nightmare was. Sorry. So, in the sense that, well, it literally destroys everything. Like, buildings break down, and, you know, people actually get hurt and stuff. But what makes Oblivion different from the rest of its, um, you know, counterparts from the other Gore nightmares is that it is basically the most dangerous nightmare. Of course, like we know how destructive its powers can be, no doubt. Like it was able to um, overpower three riders, okay, attacking at the same time. But it's also much more destructive in the sense that it doesn't have to destroy anything physically. But the real threat here is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. So, by having Nemu forget about everyone, you know, Nemu can actually erase everyone in existence. She can forget that the world exists, basically. That is the real threat of Oblivion. You know, unlike the more chaotic nature of the Catastrophe Nightmare, you know, like things go boom, things go crashing, and stuff like that. You know, Oblivion is a more quiet and rather unseeable force. Once Nema forgets about everything, you know, you can be gone in just a snap. Everybody's gone in just a snap. Although, we do see in later episodes that, once the effect is reversed, like, hey, what just happened? Where was I? Like, everybody's back, and, well, at least those who have been deeply involved in uh, this situation, like Inspector Fujimi and Nazca, they have become aware of what is happening, but to the rest of the world, basically, like, they probably didn't know what happened. They probably didn't know that they have at some point been erased out of existence just because Nemu forgot about them. Now, Nemu's kind of tragic turn comes especially around episode 48. you know uh Knowing that the writers are not able to stop um the Oblivion Nightmare physically, or their powers aren't working against it, Nemu decides to go for the ultimate sacrifice and forget herself. Basically, what she's trying to do is erase her own existence, even though she technically doesn't die, but the fact that her memories, even about herself, you know, like, they disappear. So that was her way of, trying to defeat the nightmare, the Oblivion Nightmare, from the inside. By basically erasing herself, the nightmare also goes away, which makes sense. But knowing Baku, he doesn't want this to happen, and he obviously did his very best to try and bring her back. And of course, this is what we see in episode 49. So, what also is interesting here is, like, Lady's decision. So she decides to end the illusion. She decides to, stop her own nightmare. So even though she has fused with the nightmare, I guess just like what Sieg did, with Punish. So what's interesting about these individuals is that, while they chose to fuse with their own nightmares, and they had wills that were powerful enough to suppress them. Now, I guess the thing about Lady and the Phantom Nightmare is that, well, Lady was definitely trying to not do it, but, eventually her will becomes quite weak, I'd say. That, it allowed the nightmare to take over her. But, like, in the end, so the lady fuses with the nightmare, but uses her own will to eliminate not only the nightmare but herself. So using, turning her hand into a claw, or basically, the Phantom Nightmare's claw, she actually slits her eyes out. So by blinding herself, so she wouldn't be able to see the illusion. And this also is quite an interesting move, because this, again, while she is literally fused with the Phantom Nightmare, so it also kind of eliminates the nightmare's ability to see. If you can't see anything, you cannot be deceived by illusion, which is actually really sensible in that situation. But seeing that she was also badly injured when uh, the Phantom actually attacked her, so She basically chose to die along with her own nightmare, you know, to save everyone, I guess, especially Nemu. And in the end, uh, they still share this mother daughter moment, you know, but of course, basically the lady dies in Nemu's arms. And, the sad thing about it is, like, she just wanted to live a happy life with Nemu. Even though, again, we saw it in the illusion that they made, a few episodes earlier. Uh, at first, we know that this was wrong. So the lady knows that the child that she quote unquote gave birth to is a product of a nightmare. She did everything in her power, so that code would not take her child away from her, whether it's, to downright eliminate the baby, or maybe use it as some sort of experiment and turn, I don't know, they could have turned Nemu into a weapon that uh, ironically was could have been used against the nightmares, even though, again, we do understand that the capsims use the power of the nightmares themselves. Again, go back to around like episode 5, like Nox actually says this. Um, but yeah, I think that was the point. But yeah, that is what I'm trying to say is the tragedy between them, is that they just wanted to live a life together. You know, like the lady kind of like gets her wish to become a mother, but knowing that she gave birth to what technically would have been an abomination to mankind. And you know we understand the threat that Nemu possesses, being technically a nightmare herself. So you know she did everything in her power to save her daughter. And Nemu, what's interesting about her is, again, even though she's a nightmare, she's one who basically just wants everyone to be happy. And she also just I believe that she also just wants to be loved. And at least she has found acceptance from the people who you know were doing their best to save her. So not just Baku, we also have Minami, we also have Inspector Fujimi, we have Nazca. They're all there for her now. And given that she now has a chance to exist in the real world, so Nemu is now able to, you know, live a true life that she deserves. And what's also interesting is that near the end of episode 49, so Baku decides to take on the Oblivion Nightmare himself. But now he has Nemu on his side to fight alongside him. Now, Nemu doesn't transform, but using her powers, you know, uh, basically, Oblivion tries to erase Zets from existence once again, but Nemu counteracts it with her own powers. Like, you're not going anywhere, Baku. Like, I'm going to remember you. So, if, you know, Oblivion's power comes from forgetting anything and everyone, everything and everyone, Nemu's true power comes from the opposite: memory. She was brought back by the power of memories. People remember her, and now she uses that power to remember everyone else, so that even when the Oblivion Nightmare tries to erase, nope, I'm going to remember you, you're back into existence. And this is what makes uh, like this final battle with the Oblivion interesting. And actually can't wait to see how Zets ends this coming Sunday. So, anyways, sorry for this random talk, but I just want to talk about this. So, anyways, what are your ideas? Let me know down in the comments. So, anyways, thanks for watching. As always, please do leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell so you get the latest from JEFusion. This has been Philip, and I'll see you next time. Bye.